The wind brushes softly across an empty plain, cold, wide, and timeless, somewhere far off. You hear the low rustle of dry grass and the faint creak of wood pulling against stone. A single candle flickers beside you. Its flame leans slightly, like it too is listening. Tonight, you find yourself in a place not many dream of behind a wall, a very large wall, one built not with efficiency or comfort in mind, but with calloused hands, sore backs, and an unreasonable number of dead goats. Yes, tonight, you will quietly step into the world of Imperial China, into the dust and discipline behind one of the world's most exhausting architectural decisions, from frozen mountain peaks to wind-blown deserts, from bricks baked in village kilns to watchtowers filled with suspiciously bored guards. You'll find yourself at the heart of 1,000 slow footsteps laid into stone. So, if odd little stories like this make you pause, maybe sigh a little, maybe smile without knowing why, well, I'm here every night, with more facts no one warned you would be mildly emotional. Let me know where in the world you're watching from, and what hour your night has reached. I always enjoy imagining who's out there quiet, listening, drifting. The wind is the first thing that greets you. Dry, sharp, steady. It brushes across your face like a cold hand that doesn't ask permission and doesn't explain itself. Your eyes open slowly, not because you are ready, but because the air insists. The light is pale, not morning, not quite evening, but that endless stretch of dull betweenness that soaks into everything you are standing on, packed earth hard as memory, with cracks that run deeper than your knees can handle, and the horizon ahead of you is not open or inviting, but already broken by a line that stretches left and right, farther than your neck can turn. A wall wide as a river high, as a man's, last hope, and behind you, a camp made of tents and ropes and men who stopped asking questions days ago. Your hands ache before you even move. The leather of your gloves is stiff-lined with dust and dried sweat, the scent of them mingled with horse dung, cold ashes, and something faintly metallic that might be rust or might be old blood. You squint and the wall does not blink. It is not beautiful, not clean, not even complete in most places. It curls upward and starts and stutters like a sentence begun by too many mouths and finished by none. And you realize slowly, quietly, that this is where you live now. Not in the tent, not even in the camp, but here at the edge of this thing, this gray, uneven serpent of stone and pain. Someone calls your name, or maybe not. Maybe it's a grunt, maybe it's just the wind curling around your ears and shaping itself into memory. You step forward, your foot sinking slightly into a patch of loose clay. The smell of it rises up thick and sour like rotting straw and fermented rice. Someone left a wheelbarrow leaning against a post. 2 wooden handles, one cracked, one stained. The handles are warmer than the air as your fingers wrap around them. And for a moment you pretend this is a task you chose, that you lifted this because of purpose. Not pressure, but the lie doesn't last long, and that's fine. Most lies aren't built to survive this kind of wind. You begin walking slowly between piles of stone and scattered tools, the rhythm already familiar. 1 foot, one thought, one ache, then another. The foreman passes you without a glance. His beard is frozen at the edges. His eyes are narrowed against a sun that never fully shows its face. He mutters something to the man behind you, and the man laughs. It's a short laugh clipped like a sparrow's wing caught in a door. You reach the base of the wall, or what will be the base. Someone has tied a red ribbon to one of the cornerstones. It flaps in the breeze. Not like a flag, but like a wound being aired out. You kneel and begin the work, hands on stone, breath on frost, shoulders curling forward as if by instinct you don't speak. No one does, voices carry too easily. Here and the wind steals them anyway. Your fingertips go numb and then come back to life, sharp with pins and heat. The stone is heavy, not heroic, just dull and difficult and shaped wrong, and you find yourself muttering apologies to it under your breath as you fit it into place. You don't know who first decided to stack these things from sea to step, or what voice in what Hall said. Yes, that sounds reasonable. Build a wall longer than most men's, patience taller than any ladder, and fill it with people too poor to argue and too tired to leave. You only know that today you are one of those people, and tomorrow you will be again around you. The others move like ghosts, not the kind that frighten, but the kind that have forgotten they're supposed to be elsewhere. A boy no older than 15 carries a bucket of mortar, his hands wrapped in cloth. He doesn't meet your eye, and you don't ask his name above. You two birds circle, perhaps hawks, perhaps vultures. It's too far to tell, and you're too tired to care. The shovel beside you has a crack down the center. You pick it up anyway. The earth does not care what tool you bring, as long as you bring one. The hours pass, not with sound or light, but with the ache in your knees, the rhythm of your shoulders, the taste of dust on your tongue. Lunch is a bowl of rice and dried vegetable mash, served from a pot. So black it shines, you eat with the others in silence, sitting on a slab of rock that will soon be part of the thing. Your building, you chew slowly. Each grain a small forgiveness, each bite a memory of something warmer when the bowl is empty. You don't remember finishing it. You set it down and someone takes it before. You've even exhaled properly. The sun has not moved, but the shadows have grown longer. Someone is hammering in the distance, sharp, dull, sharp. Again. It sounds like someone knocking on a door. They never want it opened. You return to the line. The wall has grown by an inch, perhaps a foot, perhaps only in your mind. The foreman has begun whistling tuneless and sharp, a signal more than a song. You lift another stone, not because it's next, but because it's nearest. Your back has become part of the rhythm now. Part of the breathing of this place. The wind picks up slightly. And you smell something new, something burning, maybe wood, maybe dung, maybe ambition. You think of your village only briefly, then tuck the thought away. It will not help you. Place this stone. You hear someone singing. Off-key far away in a dialect, you half recognize the voice rises and falls like a rope in water. No one joins him. No one tells him to stop. The light begins to fade and the work slows, not because of command, but because the body says enough. Someone drops a tool with a clang, and the sound rings out across the stone like a bell. You sit back on your heels, breath steady, but not calm. Your fingers stained white with lime dust, your lips dry, your legs hollow. You stretch slightly and your joints crack. A conversation of their own. You glance down the line, and the wall continues, still growing, still swallowing hours and effort. Without pause behind it, the land falls away into brush and shadows, and a blur of smoke from other camps, other hands doing the same work, and ahead of it, more wall, more stone, more time than anyone should try to count. Someone calls, end of day. Not with a shout, but with emotion. A turning of the hand and a lowering of the head. You rise slowly, pick up your satchel, such as it is, and begin walking back to the tent. Your boots drag your shoulders, slope. Your mind floats somewhere behind your eyes, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. The wall watches you go, without comment, just as it watched you come. It is not done, it never will be, and neither are you. The next morning begins without announcement, no bell, no rooster, no sudden change in the light, just a slow cold that seeps through the seams of your tent and reminds your bones that nothing here truly rests. Your eyes open to gray and dust and the quiet rustling of bodies rising around you one by one. Not out of eagerness, but resignation. Like animals who know the gate will open, and there is no point in pretending otherwise. Your joints creak before you move. Your back hums with the dull memory of yesterday's stone, and when you sit up, the straw beneath you crackles like dry leaves forgotten by spring. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and push aside the flap of the tent. The camp is already in motion, fires smoldering low in the mist, pots rattling with the soft clatter of breakfast made from things that do not deserve the word breakfast. You make your way to the center where tools hang on wooden racks like old teeth, some chipped, some cracked, some bent into new shapes, by hands rougher than yours, and beside them stands the foreman, tall, not in stature, but in presence, wrapped in a thick wool coat, the color of regret. His beard is streaked with white, though he's not old. His eyes are narrow and sharp, like someone who never fully blinks. He sees you before you speak and raises a hand. Not in greeting, but in warning. He steps forward and without pause places a shovel into your hands. It is heavier than it looks, the handle worn smooth by years of tired fingers, the metal blade, stained with earth and lime and stories you will never hear. The foreman grins, not wide, not kind, just a curl of the mouth that says, he knows something, you don't something. You're better off not asking. He nods once, then turns away his coat, flapping in the breeze like a flag that refuses to declare allegiance. And just like that, the day has begun. Again, the shovel is yours. Now your companion, your burden, your measure of worth. You carry it toward the wall where the stones wait silently in piles, some stacked with care, some collapsed in frustration. The line has already formed workers in staggered rows, some with baskets, some with hammers, all moving like a single exhausted animal. The sound is soft at first, scraping, lifting, settling, the quiet rhythm of repetition. You join in without instruction. You do not need one. The work explains itself. Bend, scoop, carry, lift, bend again. The cold helps at first, numbing your hands so they don't feel the weight, but it fades quickly, replaced by sweat that clings to your skin beneath layers of cloth. Your breath fogs before you, but the fog does not drift. It lingers thick, heavy, like a thought. You can shake the foreman passes by again, not watching but listening, the way his ear tilts slightly toward your shovel, the way his feet pause near uneven stacks, then move on without a word. You don't know his name, no one does not, because he hides it, but because no one dares ask. It's easier to give him titles. The Growler, the Watcher, the Hammer of Breaks. Each one earned, each one true. You lift another stone, and the muscles in your shoulders sing a note of protest. Your fingers slip, and for a moment, the rock tilts and your heart skips. Not from fear of pain, but fear of being seen failing. But it lands in place, and you breathe again, slow, shallow. The foreman is still walking, always walking, never hurrying, never still. His steps mark time better than any sun. His silence says more than any command. A man beside you drops his shovel with a grunt, his hands shaking from the cold or something deeper. The foreman stops, turns, steps forward, leans down, picks up the tool, and places it back in the man's hands. No anger, no insult, just a nod. And then he moves on, and the man resumes as if nothing happened, as if something did. Your arms are burning now, slow and deep, like coals buried in ash. Your legs ache not with sharpness, but with certainty. A knowledge that they will not stop moving until you stop entirely. The foreman returns hours later, this time with a ladle and a pot. The contents unclear, a kind of stew maybe, or just thick water. He does not speak, just offers it one bowl at a time, his eyes meeting yours for a moment, and in that glance there is no kindness. Only the barest flicker of shared fatigue. You drink slowly. The liquid scalds your tongue and tastes of roots and rust, but it fills you enough to stand again, and that is all it needs to do. The shovel waits where you left it, leaning against a mound of stone, as if patient, as if loyal. The wind rises slightly, pushing dust across the worksite, lifting edges of cloaks, pulling sweat from your skin and carrying it into the endless sky above. The foreman tightens the scarf around his neck. His eyes scan the ridge, and for the first time, you notice he's counting. Not stones, not men, not hours, but something invisible, something. Only he sees a line, perhaps, that separates those who return from those who vanish. You keep your head down, lift another load, shift another brick, scrape another patch of earth, and with every motion, you become less of a visitor and more of a piece of this place. The shovel no longer feels heavy, it feels inevitable. The foreman circles again, this time slower, his boots brushing through the dirt. Like a broom made of silence, his hand reaches down and adjusts the angle of a stone you've just placed. He does not speak, but when he walks away, you fix 3 more before you move on, because somehow he's already taught you that. Much night falls without ceremony, just the slow dimming of everything until all that remains is shape and breath and effort. You return the shovel to the rack where it hangs beside dozens of others, indistinguishable and worn. The foreman stands nearby, arms crossed, watching the fire. Not the men, as if the flames might answer questions. The rest of us are too afraid to ask. You nod to him, not as a goodbye, but as a marking of space. And he nods back just once, a small tilt of the head that says, "Today you earned your place, tomorrow you will earn it again." By the time you return to the tent, the sky has turned to slate, and the world is coated in a soft layer of dust, not from storms or wind, but from footsteps. 1,000 a day kicked up with every shift of weight until the very air feels tired. The fabric of your tent flaps faintly. A sound so thin it barely counts as noise, but somehow it fills your ears like a whisper. The entrance is tied with a cord fraying at the ends. You untie it. Slowly, fingers numb. Not from cold, but from having carried too much for too long, the flap falls open and the darkness inside welcomes you, not warmly but with familiarity, like an old coat too thin for winter, but too shaped to leave behind. You step in, and the ground inside is only marginally less hard than the earth outside. The mat is woven from reeds and something coarser, perhaps hair, perhaps just hope twisted until it held weight. There's a lantern in the corner, its oil low, its flame steady. A single bead of light flickering across the canvas walls, which are marked by smudges, handprints, notes written in a language you don't know, or perhaps a dialect too old to speak aloud anymore. You kneel slowly, each joint taking its time, settling into angles that have lost their softness. The air smells of sweat and wax and something bitter. Maybe tea, maybe mold. Your satchel lies where you left it, folded neatly but no longer clean. You pull it open, take out the small cloth wrap that holds your last piece of dried plum, the edges sugared with dust. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, letting the sourness cut through the taste of brick and silence. The tent does not block sound. Not really. You still hear the murmur of men settling into their own fabric. Shelters the shuffle of boots, the clink of ladles, the occasional laugh forced but not false, and somewhere farther, the bray of a mule. Sharp-tired, a reminder that even beasts break in their own ways. You lie down slowly, your back finds the edge of a knot in the mat. Your elbow lands on something round, maybe a stone, maybe the top of a buried bottle. You don't bother to move it. Not tonight. You stare at the ceiling, canvas stretched tight across bamboo poles tied with rope. Each knot pulled taut by hands, no softer than yours. Above your head is a dark stain shaped vaguely like a bird or a question mark, and your eyes follow it until the blur becomes memory, and you wonder how long you've been here, not in days but in distance from who you were when you arrived. You think about the first night, the way the tent flapped louder, the way the shadows seemed taller, the way you flinched when the wind groaned through the joints in the camp's walls. Now the sound barely registers. You listen, not for danger, but for absence. The sounds you'd worry about are the ones you no longer hear. Footsteps that stop too soon, voices that don't return. One man, 3 tents down, hasn't spoken in 2 days. Not from injury, but from something else. A quiet that settled over him like snow and refused to melt your fingers, curl slightly into the mat, pressing into the woven ridges as if searching for something solid beneath all this. Waiting, your mind drifts not toward escape, but toward clarity. A strange clarity born from repetition, from the same work, the same bowl, the same breath over and over, until everything outside the pattern falls away. You wonder what's happening beyond the wall, who passes it, who questions it, who names it, sacred or foolish or invisible to them entirely. And then you wonder if it matters, because you are not on the wall or beyond it, you are within it. Part of the long, slow pulse that pushes it forward inch by inch. The lantern dims and the corners of the tent dissolve into blur. You lie still for a while, listening to your own breath, trying to tell if it sounds different here than it did back home. And the thought of home does come, though softer now, less like a place and more like a dream of warmer water or a meal. You didn't have to swallow before it cooled. The wind presses gently against the canvas, making it ripple. In slow waves, a rhythm that rocks the air around you like the inside of a ship, sailing through dry land. You reach for your cloak, pull it over your chest, not for heat, but for weight. The feeling of something holding you, even if it's just cloth and memory. Your eyes close, then open, then close again. And somewhere between that movement, you start to count things. Not numbers, but shapes. The fold in the wall, the shadow of your boot, the way the light dances across your knuckles. Then you lose count. And that's how, you're almost gone. The questions begin quietly, not spoken, not fully formed, just drifting up like smoke from a fire you thought you put out. What if I leave? What if I stay? What if this wall was never meant to end? And then the simpler ones. Why is the clay red here who ties the ribbons to the corner? Stones who was the first to sleep in this tent. And did they feel this same weight when they pulled the flap closed behind them? You don't answer the questions, they are not meant to be. Answered, only felt the way pain is felt, or wind or time. The lantern flickers once, twice, and fades into ember. Your breath slows not to sleep, not yet, but to that moment before it. When the body settles and the thoughts stop announcing themselves, you can still hear the foreman somewhere just outside his boots dragging slightly across gravel the way they always do, before he stops near the tents and counts, not out loud, not with numbers, but with presence. He stands for a long moment, then moves on, and you are still here, counted present and not yet broken. The tent holds you for now. A loose cradle woven of rope and dirt and unanswered questions, and for tonight, that is enough. At first you thought it was a wall like any other, a structure, a boundary, something built to say this is ours, and that is not something flat and straight, something that cuts the land with clean purpose. But now, you know it is none of those things. It does not divide, it absorbs. It does not claim it, consumes it. It is not a line, it is a scar, a long, uneven wound stitched across the earth with stone and bone and stubbornness. And each day you spend here, you understand that a little more, the morning starts like all others. In silence, the camp moves in slow ritual. The men shuffle from tents, wrapping scarves around faces, tugging at belts, slapping their arms to wake them. The steam from pots rises in thin columns and disappears before reaching anything like a sky. You take your bowl, not out of hunger, but habit. The porridge tastes the same every day, and your tongue has stopped bothering to describe it. Your legs are sore before you stand. Your hands ache before you grip the shovel. The sun hides as usual, behind a pale sheet of cloud, and everything in the light looks older than it should. You walk toward the wall, and even from this distance you feel its presence not like a monument, not like a destination, but like something pressing outward from the center of the land, like heat or gravity or grief. You reach the base and stare up the new section to be built. Stretches like a broken tooth, waiting to be filled. The stones are waiting already, some rounded from erosion, some jagged like anger made solid. The lime dust catches in the wind, turning every breath into a question and every blink into a sting. You begin work stacking, scraping, adjusting, lifting stone by stone, foot by foot. Each movement echoes those before it, and yet each feels personal. Your fingerprints press into mortar that will harden and hold long after your name is forgotten. The wall curves here, not gently but as if pulled off course by something stronger than will. Perhaps the lay of the land, perhaps the memory of something buried. Beneath you, no one speaks much today. The air feels too full, as if words would tip it over and cause something to fall loose from the sky. The foreman walks the ridge of earth above you, his shape black against the brighter haze of morning. He pauses sometimes, hand on hip, surveying not the wall but the men, as if trying to guess which one will break next beside you. A younger worker struggles with a stone too large for his frame. He grips it wrong, his shoulders twist, and when he lets go, the rock falls with a thud that shakes the ground. The foreman does not call out, does not correct him, just turns slowly and walks on, as if the failure has already been folded into the days. Plan you help the boy not with words, but with a gesture. Your hand on the right corner, guiding the lift. And when it lands in place, he exhales like someone letting go of a secret. The wall grows slowly, not upward but outward, crawling, like something alive stretching into the fog beyond where your eyes can follow. Someone says, this section was ordered by a general who has never seen it, that it was sketched with ink on silk in a warm, dry palace far from here. And yet, here you are, measuring that ink with your back, with your breath, with your years. You step back for a moment, stretching the tendons in your neck, watching the shape of the wall bend not by plan, but by compromise, by the way the land says no, and the stone says nothing, and the bodies in between say yes, until they cannot anymore. You touch one of the older bricks near the base. It is warm from sunlight, rough with time. The mortar chipped and patched and chipped again, like a wound reopened and sewn too tightly. You run your fingers along the edge and feel where another set of hands once smoothed it into place long before you arrived, perhaps long before your village even existed, and in that moment you understand that this wall was never meant to stand perfectly. It was meant to hold imperfectly for as long as people needed it to hold the curve in this section. Wiesen designed, it was inherited a shift in the land, a collapsed scaffold, a decision made after too many deaths and not enough rest. But it remains here twisting like a spine, bent from weight and unwilling to break. You return to your place, lift another stone. The sun tries once to burn through the clouds, fails and retreats again. The wind picks up dry and sharp, dragging flecks of dust into your eyes, your mouth, your skin. Someone behind you sings under his breath. A song with no tune, just a trail of vowels and syllables that loop endlessly around a single word. You don't recognize the foreman passes once more, this time slower. His eyes tired but clear, his coat pulled tighter across his chest. He stops near the edge where the wall bends and rests a hand on the mortar, not tapping, not inspecting, just holding it as if listening for something within it. Then he moves on and the wall continues growing beneath your feet, beside your hands across the days you stop counting the bricks, not because they are too many, but because counting makes it seem like there will be an end and the wall does not. Like that kind of hope, it prefers silence, repetition, the long, slow drag of labor across seasons. Someone drops a trowel. The clatter rings loud against the stone, and everyone freezes for just a breath, before resuming as if the sound itself carried a warning that no one could afford to explain. Your knees hurt, your fingertips are cracked, your spine feels like it's been twisted into the shape of the wall itself, but you do not stop. The sky darkens slightly, the horizon blurs, and you realize the day is over. Not because it feels finished, but because the others have begun to walk away. You place your final stone, press it gently into its bed, and step back. The curve you helped shape is not beautiful, but it is real. It is crooked and heavy and full of effort, and it will still be here tomorrow when you return, and the day after that, and the day after that. And even when no one remembers your face, they will walk this wall and see this bend and feel something not quite right. And maybe that is enough. Not a monument, not a border, but a scar deep and permanent and impossible to ignore. The sun slips away before the work does, fading behind a ridge with no ceremony. Just a slow draining of color from the sky until everything becomes the same shade of cold, the same texture of dim. The call to end the day comes not from a voice, but from the change in the air. A shared pause among the men, a long breath before the tools are lowered and hands unfasten their grips. Your body responds before your mind does muscles, moving into rest before permission is granted. The wall does not care if you stop. It does not notice it, does not sigh. It simply waits for you to return. You walk back to camp slower than usual, dragging the silence with you like an extra weight. The path is narrow, worn flat by boots and wheels, and hope pressed deep into the dirt. The sky above you is pale now, tinged with soft violet, and lined with the faintest silver sliver of moon, barely enough to cast a shadow, but more than enough to remind you that time is moving forward. Whether your body is ready or not, the tent is. Still there, still sagging slightly at the corners, still holding your place in this world, like a bookmark in a book you didn't choose to read. You step inside without thought, and the warmth greets you like a ghost, not truly present but familiar. You drop your satchel beside the mat, peel off the outer layer of your cloak, and shake the dust from it. Gently, the lantern is unlit, but the moonlight seeps through the fabric walls, painting your bed in gray. Outlines you sit for a moment, fingers resting on your knees, breath shallow. You could lie down. Now you could close your eyes and let the weight of the day pull you inward. But something resists, not loudly, not in protest, but in curiosity. And so you rise again and step back out into the evening, where the fire in the center of camp is still burning low and lazy, sending up soft red light and lazy embers. A few men sit around it, not speaking, just listening to the wood crackle and the wind whisper through the dried grass. One of them looks up at you, nods, once then returns to his bowl of rice. You don't speak either. Instead, you move past the fire along the edge of camp, where the half-built stones of tomorrow's work lie stacked in uneven piles, shapes half-formed plans. Interrupted, you stop beside one of the stacks, your hands moving instinctively to trace the edges of the topmost brick. The stone is cold smooth on one side, rough on the other. Your fingers feel the weight before they lift it, and you find yourself turning it gently, testing its balance against your palm, then setting it down and picking up another, comparing their angles, like a child playing a quiet game. You don't know why you do it? Not really, maybe to understand the work before it begins. Maybe to learn something. The daylight doesn't teach in the dark. The stones feel different, heavier in thought, if not in mass. The sounds around you are softer now. No hammers, no orders, just the crunch of boots and the distant clink of a spoon against a bowl. You kneel near the pile and begin to arrange the stones, not building exactly. Just learning, placing one beside another, feeling how the edges meet, how the gaps resist, how the smallest shift can change the shape of everything. You work slowly by instinct, letting your breath match the pace of your hands, the moon above you, climbing ever so slightly, casting a pale shimmer on the top of each stone, like frost or memory. You feel the ground beneath your knees, the way it gives slightly with your weight, the way the cold creeps through the fabric and presses against your bones. But you do not stop. Your hands are warm, now warmed by movement and dust and focus. You place another stone beside the first, then another. Not a wall, not yet just a line, a row. A beginning, in the distance, someone begins to hum. The tune aimless but soothing, rising and falling with the wind. You don't recognize it, but it fits, and your hands move in time with it as if the stones themselves respond to sound. Each one set down becomes a breath, exhaled, a thought, let go. Promise made to no one and nothing. Eventually, your little line curves unintentionally, but not wrongly. You follow the bend as if led by the weight itself, and the shape that begins to emerge is not perfect. Not even sturdy, but it feels right, and you sit back, heels pressed to the dirt, arms resting across your lap, and look at what you've done, a single stretch of stone, a lesson made from silence and dust. The moon, now higher, still stares down with no judgment. Only light your eyelids flutter briefly, and you realize you've been working longer than you meant to. The camp is quiet now. Most of the fires dim, most of the men asleep. The hum has faded, the footsteps gone, even the wind has lowered its voice. You stand slowly, your knees stiff, your hands white with powder, your back reminding you that even learning costs something. You brush your palms together, the dust rising like smoke and vanishing, and return to the tent. Step by step, the stones behind you, sitting in a shape that will not last, but will not be forgotten. Either you reach the flap, lift it, enter once more into your private dusk, and lie down. Without words, the mat is less cruel now, the cloak more forgiving, and your hands still remember the shape of the stone. They last held you close your eyes, and the moon still hovers just behind your thoughts, casting its pale light across the unfinished row. You built alone, stacking questions where no one was watching, learning to balance one edge against another, until even the weight began to feel like something you could understand. The cook is already awake by the time the sky begins to think about changing color, though the difference between night and morning here is less a shift in light and more a change in smell. You don't see him at first, but you hear the sound of the pot being dragged across the stones, that hollow scrape followed by the short, sharp grunt he always makes when lifting something he knows is heavier than it should be. The air is cold, wet, not with rain, but with the breath of 1,000 men rising from the dirt at the same time, and the smoke from the small fires curling low, refusing to climb. You make your way toward the center of camp. Not quickly, not slowly, just in the way that feet move when they've done this before, more times than they've counted. The cook stands over the flames, bent slightly at the waist, arms bare, his sleeves tied up with string, and his hands never still. He stirs with a long wooden paddle, a scar running along the grain of the handle from where it split once and was repaired. With twine and silence, the water in the pot does not boil, yet it trembles along the edges, like it too is reluctant to do what's expected of it. He doesn't look at you, but he knows you're there, he always does. He reaches without turning and hands you a cup, metal dented, blackened by fire and time. You take it with fingers still swollen from yesterday, the heat from the bottom sharp against your palm, and you hold it like a blessing or a test. The steam rises gently, curling into your face, carrying with it the scent of rice and bone and something green that might once have been a leaf, or might be wishful thinking. You sip slowly, the taste is thin, like memory stretched over too many mouths, but it is warm, and that is enough. The cook stirs again, his paddle slicing through the broth like an oar through mud, and for a moment he seems to forget he is not alone. You watch him as he works, adding a handful of something from a cloth pouch, then another from a wooden box stacked with ingredients that all look the same in this light. The water bubbles now, not fiercely, just steadily, as if negotiating with the fire. One quiet protest at a time. The pot is large, iron-rimmed, patched twice along the base, and older than most of the men here. It has fed builders, soldiers, drifters, and once held rainwater for 3 days. When the well ran dry, the cook never speaks unless he has to. But when he does, his voice is flat, like a board smoothed from too much sanding. He turns to glance at the line forming behind you. Not a proper line, just a slow cluster of shapes drawn by scent and necessity. Bowls held in hands that no longer hope for variety, only for volume. The man in front of you shifts his weight, foot to foot, steam rising from his cup, fogging the side of his face. He says nothing, and you say nothing back. Not out of rudeness, but because there is nothing to say that has not already been muttered in dream or groaned in pain, the cook begins to ladle the broth into bowls with precision. Each scoop, the same arc same, weight same pause between, lifts his hands. Know this motion better than they know, rest when your turn comes. He doesn't ask your name, doesn't ask if you want more or less. He simply tilts the ladle and lets the contents fall into your bowl with a splash. So soft it sounds like forgiveness. You thank him with a nod and move aside, crouching by the fire, where the stones are warm and the smoke thin enough to breathe. The broth is not good, but it is honest, hot, slightly bitter with something gritty at the bottom, a rice husk, or a mistake. You eat slowly, letting the warmth move through you. First, your throat, then your chest, then your stomach, which growls not with hunger, but with recognition around you. Others slurp in silence the sound, not unpleasant, but rhythmic like a song no one remembers. The words to the fire crackles once sends up a spray of sparks that fade before reaching the edge of dawn, and the cook stirs again, his back to you. His head bowed slightly as though listening for something. No one else can hear someone asks him what day it is, and he doesn't answer. Just keeps stirring, and the man doesn't ask again. Because the question was never really meant to be answered, a dog walks past thin-ribbed tail, down sniffs at the edge of the fire, then vanishes between tents. The cook tosses a bone after it without looking, and the clatter it makes against the stone is the loudest sound in camp. For a full minute the line has dwindled now. Most have returned to their posts or their tools or the burden of stillness. You finish your bowl, set it on a flat rock near the others, where yesterday's bowls rest cleaned by ash and use and time. The cook doesn't look your way as you stand, but you know he saw you leave. You always know there is no gratitude exchanged, no farewell, no promise of return. But there is the quiet agreement that this will happen again tomorrow and the day after that, and that both of you will be there. The fire lower now sighs once as if tired of pretending to warm anything, and you walk away, not full, not satisfied, not stronger, but steadier. The broth in your belly, the taste in your mouth, the scent of boiling water clinging to your hair. The cook behind you, still stirring, still silent, still boiling water, again. He appears just after midday when the sun has reached its highest point. Though here the sun rarely feels like a presence, more like a pale coin pressing faint light through the veil of dust and breath. The men are quiet, the hammers slower, the shovels dragged rather than lifted, and the wall rests half-built like a thought abandoned in mid-sentence. You are sitting on a pile of bricks, knees bent, arms wrapped around them, chin against your wrist, when you see him stepping carefully between baskets of stone, his robe too clean, his shoes too thin for this place, and his hands moving as if brushing invisible dust from the air around him. He wears a small hat, rounded dark, the kind that marks him as someone who once read more than he carried, and in his right hand he holds a scroll loosely tied at the end. As if even the string knew it was, and meant for this wind, he does not walk like the rest of you. He glides not gracefully but without weight, as if his presence here is temporary. Something on loan, a favor granted and soon to be revoked. He stops near the base of the wall where two workers are chiseling mortar and begins to speak without being asked. His voice is soft, almost musical, but carries strangely well, as though the very air has decided to make room for his words. He talks about the dynasty, the emperor, the vision of unity. He says the wall is not a barrier, but a spine that holds the land together, that each stone is a letter in the poem of civilization. And you stare at him blankly. Not because you disagree, but because your arms are shaking and your breath is shallow, and no poem has ever carried this much weight on your shoulders. He continues unbothered, moving his hands as he speaks, shaping ideas. You can hold, explaining how each province contributes its own strength, how the granaries keep you alive, how the engineers measured the angles using instruments older than your village. His face is pale, his cheeks unlined, his fingers stained with ink, not dirt. And when he smiles, it is the kind of smile that has never needed to apologize. The others pretend not to listen, but you can feel their attention. The way bodies shift slightly, the way tools rest longer between strikes. He unrolls the scroll, revealing a diagram, neat columns, flowing characters, brush strokes, confident and sharp. It means something to him, perhaps even to the foreman who watches from a distance, arms, folded jaw. Set but to you, it is a map of elsewhere, of decisions made in rooms you will never enter behind, doors you will never touch, He kneels beside a section of half-laid stone points at the seam and begins to explain the layering technique, how moisture is redirected, how weight is balanced, how one mistake here could ripple across 10 miles of wall. He speaks with the patience of someone who believes knowledge is a kind of charity, and you find yourself resenting him just a little. Not for what he says, but for the way he says it. Like truth is a tool that anyone can wield if they just know where to place their hands. You glance down at your palms, cracked rough skin lined with fine cuts from lime and grit, and know that some knowledge does not come from scrolls. He stands again, dusts off his robe, though it is still clean, and thanks the workers as if he had interrupted a game, not labor. He turns to go, but pauses near you, his eyes meeting yours for the first time, and in that moment, something flickers across his face. Not pity, not respect, just the brief recognition that you are real, that your sweat is not metaphor, and your silence is not ignorance. He opens his mouth as if to speak again, but closes it and nods. Once small, sharp, respectful, then walks away back toward the carts where his escort waits a pair of guards in armor, too polished for dust. Their expressions unreadable, their hands resting near their hilts. You watch as the scholar climbs into the cart, settles the scroll across his knees, and disappears down the path, leaving behind nothing but a thinner silence and the memory of a voice that tried to name the thing you've been living inside all this time. Someone exhales sharply beside you. The foreman scratches his beard, spits into the dirt, and mutters something that sounds like poetries. Good for soft hands and cold mornings, and then walks away without looking back. You return to your work, your fingers closing around the next stone, pressing it into place slowly, firmly, without elegance, but with certainty. And as you do, you hear again the words the scholar left behind. Each stone, a letter. Each tower, a sentence, each death. A pause in a paragraph no one will ever finish. And you wonder, not for the first time, if the wall was meant to protect or to be read, or simply to be endured, and whether in the eyes of history there is any difference at all. You wake before the light, not because anything startles you, but because the discomfort never truly left your body, only paused to let your mind wander, and now it calls you back, one ache at a time. Your eyes open into darkness, not thick, but familiar, the inside of your tent. Breathing softly around you, the canvas walls cold to the touch, the air wet with the kind of chill that doesn't bite it, seeps and coils around your ribs. You try to roll over and feel the straw beneath. You shift noisily, a crackling sound, like dry leaves stepped on, too late in the season, and something sharp pokes the edge of your neck. You reach up slowly, fingers brushing along your cheek until they pull free, a single length of straw matted with saliva, curved from the shape of your mouth. And you stare at it in your hand, as if unsure whether to laugh or cough. You sit up slowly, spine, reluctant shoulders creaking like old wood, and glance toward the lantern. Though you know it is unlit, its shape faintly outlined by the dim gray. Beginning to leak through the walls, the blanket tangled at your waist is damp, in places not from rain, but from the slow accumulation of breath and sweat and weight that tense like this absorb over time. You stretch your legs one at a time, boots still on from the day before, because sometimes removing them is more trouble than it's worth, and you feel the thin cloth beneath you sticking slightly to the skin at the back of your knees. You rub your eyes, but it does nothing. The grit remains not from sleep, but from stone, from dust, from hours spent squinting at the horizon, pretending it changes. Someone outside coughs a deep, dry sound, followed by the unmistakable crack of knuckles being stretched too early. You reach for your water skin, lift it to your lips, and drink something tepid, metallic, tasting like rope and rust, but wet, and that's enough. The tent creaks faintly as a breeze moves across the camp, lifting one corner of the fabric, just high enough to let in a sliver of pale blue light, and you realize that morning is not arriving. It is already here, simply refusing to announce itself. You pull your cloak tighter around your chest, stand with care, and duck out into the world. The sky above is low and indifferent, a soft lid pressed down over the mountains and the wall, and every pair of tired shoulders in between. Smoke curls from a few fires, men crouch beside them. Shoulders hunched, bowls cradled in calloused hands. No one speaks, they only eat or stare or scratch at something that itches. The ground is muddy from the frost melted by too many feet, and your boots sink just enough to remind you that nothing is ever fully dry. Here you walk slowly to the edge of camp, where the wall waits not with menace or purpose, but with familiarity. And as you near it, you glance down at your hands, flexing them, absently. Watching the dirt crumble from beneath your fingernails, the first task is always the same, a small pile of loose stones to be cleared from. Yesterday's shift, some knocked loose by careless. Feet others dislodged by wind or the weight of their neighbors, and you begin without needing to be told. Picking them up one by one, stacking them to the side, forming small towers that will be knocked over again before long. But for now, stand like altars to repetition. The rhythm returns quickly. The bend lift, stack, pause, breathe, repeat. Your back finds its own tempo. Your arms swing, not with strength, but with surrender. And your thoughts scatter like birds at the edge of a field, some rising sharply, some drifting, some refusing to leave completely. You think about the scholar again, his hands, his words, the way he spoke of structure and meaning, and how none of it matched the weight of the stone in your hands, the taste of straw in your mouth. When you woke, the way your breath fogged against the fabric wall, as you sat wondering whether the day had begun or simply never ended. The wall ahead of you gleams faintly with frost, the edges of the bricks sharp and glistening like rows of dull teeth, and you press your palm flat against one, feeling the sting, the cold, and the life beneath it. It hums not with magic or power, but with memory, the echo of all the hands that have pressed against it before yours, fingers bent, backs curled, faces turned skyward, eyes closed against wind and sand and snow. The stone does not remember names, but it remembers effort, and you push gently once before returning to your work. The sun creeps higher, but does not warm, only reveals colors that were already there, only hidden the gray of the mortar, the red of the clay, the brown of the dried blood on someone's sleeve. You do not ask whose, you do not need to. The wall is not cruel, but it is exacting. It accepts everything, but forgets nothing, and today you are simply part of what it accepts. The morning passes not in hours, but in wait, in repetition, in the quiet muttering of men, too tired to speak properly and too cold to be silent. You stack another row and another, your fingers raw, your mouth dry, your stomach beginning to grumble softly, not with hunger, but with routine. And you know that soon the cook will begin to boil water again, and that steam will rise again, and that cup will be passed again, and that when you drink, you will not taste broth or herbs or comfort, only heat and continuation. And that too is enough. And when the foreman walks past, eyes narrowed, scarf pulled high against the wind, you nod to him, and he nods back, and nothing more is needed, because he has seen the straw on your collar, the dirt on your palms, the small cut on your lip, and knows without asking that you woke with straw in your mouth and still came to lift stone, and that sometimes that is the only kind of courage that counts. You meet him at the edge of the scaffolding, where the wood moans under too many feet, and the ropes sway like tired thoughts caught in wind. He's already there, one boot pressed against a beam, one arm resting on his knee, chewing slowly on something that might be root or habit. His armor is patchy, more leather than iron, stitched with string, dyed the color of old blood and sun. His face is sharp, but not cruel, lined but not broken, and when he sees you dragging a basket of mortar behind you, he smirks without lifting his head. He doesn't speak right away, just watches the way you struggle slightly with the weight, not offering help, just presence. And once you've set it down, he tilts his chin and says in a dialect, you don't recognize something that sounds like a compliment and a warning? At the same time you blink and he laughs low and dry, like gravel rolled in cloth, and says something else in a different tongue, this time faster, more musical, then looks at you. Waiting when you say nothing, he nods, slowly, as if confirming something he already knew, and says, well, start with the soft ones. He begins to teach. Not like a scholar, not with scrolls or lines, but like a brother, older, rougher. Resigned, his fingers move in rhythm with his words, shaping the air around each phrase, and he leans in close so only you hear them. These curses, these shards of language that carry more history than law and more truth than scripture. The first is from the West, short clipped thick with consonants. It means something like, may your roof collapse before your soup cools. And he grins as he says, it says it was his mother's favorite before she lost her teeth to a falling tile. The second is Southern from the coast, soft vowels drawn out like waves. It translates poorly something about goats and ancestors and the shame of small fires. But he assures you it's effective, especially when whispered through a smile. The third he claims is from the north, though he's never been there, and it tastes bitter in the mouth. Like metal, or regret. It's a phrase built like a wall, layered and heavy, and meant to wound slowly to rot in the mind of the one who hears it. And the fourth is old, older than him, older than the wall, maybe older than dirt itself. 3 syllables that he won't write down, only say once and never again. He tells you this one is not for everyday use, not for anger, not for pride, only for truth. When there's nothing else to throw but your whole self. He leans back after that, spits into the dirt, and stretches his arms overhead, bones cracking like old rope, and you realize the lesson is over, or at least paused, and that he never asked your name and never offered his. But somehow you've learned more about him in 20 breaths than you have about most men. In 20 days he shifts his weight, stands slowly and says, "Come on, let's carry that load together." And without waiting, he lifts one side of the basket, his hands scarred and strong. Your hands grip the other, and together you move not easily but easier, the path narrow, the boards uneven, the air thick with dust and unfinished orders as you walk. He talks more, not about cursing, but about soldiers. He once knew one who wrote poems on the inside of his shield, one who sang lullabies to his sword, one who claimed he could see ghosts walking along the top of the wall, dressed in robes, not armor, and who bowed each morning before picking up his spear. He says some soldiers die in glory, some in mud, most in between, but all of them curse, and that's what binds them. Not loyalty or cause, but the ability to spit back at the world when it spits first. When you reach the end of the scaffolding, he sets the basket down, rolls his shoulders and says, "Remember, it's not about the words. It's about the breath behind them and the look in your eye and the silence that follows." Then he walks away, not far, just enough to let you work alone again, but not alone. And you find yourself whispering one of the phrases he taught you under your breath, not out of anger, just to feel how. It fits in your mouth like a blade hidden in a boot or a coin tucked beneath the tongue, a kind of armor. The wall stretches before you, high and unkind, the stones cold, the mortar sticky, the sun slowly carving shadows that will disappear before they settle. But the words stay the ones he gave you. They hang in the air like smoke without fire, and you carry them into the afternoon, one stone at a time, one breath, one curse, one rhythm. You did not choose, but now cannot forget. They say it happened during the third watch, though no one agrees on what time that really means. Only that it was dark and cold, and that something shifted not with a crash or cry, but with a sound softer than breath, a kind of sigh that moved through the stone, like memory. The wall did not scream, it simply gave in, like a knee buckling under weight. Too long carried, it was the southern section past the dry ravine. The part everyone assumed was the strongest, thick with reinforcements and prayers carved quietly into the mortar by men who'd long since stopped believing in gods but still believed in habit. It wasn't your shift that night. You were curled near the fire, wrapped in layers that smelled of old sweat and faint smoke, and your dreams had just begun to drift towards something warm when the ground beneath you exhaled, not violently, not enough to throw you, but enough to wake something behind your ribs. You opened your eyes slowly and saw others sitting up, blinking, listening. The silence was loud the way silences get when they're full of something hiding, and for a moment, no one moved. Then came the sound, like a yawn stretched across stone, a long, slow creak, then a low, muffled rumble, and then nothing. Again, not fear, exactly just alertness. Men stood slowly, wrapped their cloaks tighter. Some reached for tools, not weapons. Because what can you fight if the thing falling is the thing meant to protect you? Someone muttered a curse in dialect. You recognized from earlier that day, and someone else crossed themselves twice and spat. The fire crackled uncertainly as if unsure whether to rise or hide, and you rose too, boots still stiff from the cold, back aching already from the promise of what the morning would bring. And you followed the line of men shuffling toward the southern post, where the lanterns burned unevenly, and the wind seemed to lean harder than before. When you reached the ridge, you saw it, or what was left of it. Not a collapse, not a ruin, just a sag like the wall had exhaled and lost interest. The top row of bricks dipped inward like a spine bent in shame, and along one section the mortar had crumbled completely, leaving a jagged smile of exposed stone teeth. No one spoke loudly. Some didn't speak at all. Just stood there, arms folded or hands on hips. Faces unreadable, the foreman arrived wrapped in a coat too thin, his hair flattened by sleep and disbelief. and he stared for a long time, then cursed once slowly with the weight of someone whose bones had seen this coming, but had hoped. Anyway, he didn't shout. Didn't order, just nodded once and said, "Lanterns here, ropes there, keep the others back and find the cook. Someone's going to need hot water, not for drinking for burns." You stepped forward, not because you were told, but because the silence around the wall was louder than anything else, and part of you needed to touch it to know it was real. You crouched near the base, reached out and pressed your palm to a broken stone. It was warm, not from fire, but from friction from the way. Gravity had tried and almost won, and in the cracks, you saw something that might have been moss or blood or both. It was hard to tell. In that light, someone beside you whispered that they'd heard it breathe first, and someone else said, "It had groaned like a man dying slowly," and another said, "No, it was just a wall." And walls don't feel, but you knew better because you'd spent weeks pressing your own skin against it, learning its moods and murmurs, and you'd felt it tired before. Now it was simply honest. The scholar from before arrived, then robes flapping too clean again, and he stared at the damage with a look that hovered between awe and calculation. He didn't speak at first, just traced the break with his eyes, lips moving in silent geometry, then finally said something about the weight distribution and the angle of frost and how sometimes even the strongest structure buckles when asked to bear what it was never designed for. And the foreman said nothing, just walked away back into the dark where men had already begun hauling stone again, as if rebuilding could undo the collapse. You stayed a little longer, crouched beside the broken edge, running your fingers along the fracture line. It was not sharp, just worn like old bone, and as the wind rose around you carrying grit and the scent of burnt oil, you thought about how something so massive could fall so quietly. No heroics, no warning, no glory, just gravity and silence. You stood slowly, stretched your back, and walked back toward camp, where the fire still burned low, and a few men huddled in cloaks talking softly about things they didn't believe had happened. The wall would be rebuilt, that much was certain, but the break would remain in the memory of everyone who saw it, not as failure, but as truth, that nothing made by hands, however noble or vast, is beyond the quiet whisper of surrender. And as you lay back down on the straw that night, curling your body against the cold, you closed your eyes and felt it again, that low, deep rumble, not from the wall, this time, but from inside your chest, where some part of you recognized what it meant to bend, to break, and still be called strong. You only see him in the mornings, before the carts arrive, before the sun lifts the frost from the clay piles, before the camp stirs properly awake, when the sky is still the color of breath and ash. He's always there, crouched over his molds, his fingers already slick with water and fine dust, his hands shaped like spades, wide, flat, thick-skinned, each knuckle rounded, each nail dark with sediment. They call him the brick maker, not out of title, but habit-like, calling the wind cold or the river wet. No one remembers where he came from, or if he ever came at all. It's as if he emerged from the clay itself, fully formed, quiet, and certain. He doesn't speak much, only nods when spoken to and hums when alone. A low, rhythmless sound like wind caught in a jug, or the memory of a song once learned under duress. His hut is just canvas and sticks, a roof bowed low, and walls stitched together from discarded sacks. But inside, it always smells of earth. Not filth, not sweat, not rot, but earth living and clean and hard. You watch him one morning from the shade of a dying tree, arms crossed, breath, fogging softly, and he doesn't notice, or maybe he does, and simply doesn't mind. His hands move without pause, scooping, pressing, shaping, slicing, lifting. The same gesture repeated 100 times, like prayer without words or faith, without hope. He dips his fingers into a shallow bowl of water, wipes them across the inside of the mold, then presses clay into the form with both thumbs, slow and firm, not brutal, but absolute. And when he lifts the brick free, he turns it gently, as if checking a newborn's back for breath, and then sets it on the board beside the others. His bricks are not perfect, but they are honest. The edge is rough, the lines uneven, but they hold heat and weight and silence in equal measure. Some say he was once a potter before a flood ruined his kiln. Others say he was a thief who found redemption in repetition. One man claimed to have seen him crying once, weeping silently as he shaped a brick, then kissing it, before setting it down, but no one asked him more because some stories are meant to be held. Not shared one morning, you approach without speaking, crouch beside him and watch close enough to feel the heat rising off the fresh bricks and the cool damp of the clay beneath your knees. He glances at you, once then continues working, and for a while the only sounds are his breath and the squelch of earth being reshaped into structure. He hands you a lump of clay silently nodding toward a mold, and you mimic his movements as best you can. Your thumbs too stiff, your pressure uneven. But you try, and when you lift your first brick, it crumbles along the edge, and he does not laugh. He only reaches over, reshapes. It presses your hands into the right place, guiding, without correcting, showing, without speaking, and after a few more tries, your brick holds not perfectly, but long enough to be placed in the sun to dry. He hums again this time, a little louder, and you realize it's not a song at all, just a sound he makes. To keep the rhythm inside from spilling out, you sit there longer than you intend, molding, pressing, setting the sun, slowly climbing behind you until the air is warm and your shoulders ache. And when you finally stand stretching your back, you notice your hands. They're covered in clay and cracks and fine lines and traces of something older than names. You nod to him once quietly, and he nods back before returning to his work, as if you'd never left, and the next morning, you return, and the next. And each time you speak less and feel more, and begin to understand that the wall is not just built by lifting, it is built by forming, by pressing, by surrendering your body to a shape that will never remember your name, but will carry your fingerprints buried in stone and dust for centuries, and maybe that's enough, maybe that's everything. The first drop falls in the early hours, when the sky is still the color of old wool, and the wind carries the scent of something distant and damp. It taps the roof of your tent like a knuckle too polite to insist. And at first, you don't move, only lie there. Eyes closed, listening to the rhythm, build from one drop to many, from scattered taps to a soft patter, then a steady beat, then something heavier, something that doesn't ask for permission. You roll onto your side and feel the fabric beneath you, already damp straw clinging to your sleeve like memory. And when you sit up, the tent sighs around you as if bracing itself for what's to come outside. It's not just rain, its presence thick and constant. A wall of water, not angry, just certain the kind of rain that doesn't arrive. It settles and stays and makes everything feel slower, heavier, closer. You duck outside and the world is different colors, muted edges, softened shapes, running like ink on wet parchment. Men move quietly, faces turned down cloaks. Drawn tight but already soaked through the fire pits. Hiss and smoke curls sideways. The foreman stands near the supply tent, his hat sagging with weight, his mouth a tight line, and his eyes scanning the horizon. Not for danger, but for duration. Because this kind of rain doesn't end. It waits. It wears down. It wins by staying longer than your patience. You're assigned to rope duty today, reinforcing the scaffoldings, checking the knots and lashes, making sure the weight of the water doesn't pull the whole thing down around your heads. The ropes are slick beneath your fingers, cold and alive like snakes pulled from a river. And each step along the beams is slower than the last, the wood groaning with absorbed misery. Every knot you touch tells a story, some tight with panic. Others too loose from haste, and you tighten them one by one, whispering curses in borrowed dialects, just loud enough for the wind to carry them nowhere. The rain drips from your hood, down your spine, collects at your waist, pools inside. Your boots, and you stop trying to stay dry because that's not the game anymore. Now it's about motion, about not stopping, about finding a rhythm in discomfort and staying there until the day bends, or your knees do. During a break, you crouch beneath a half-covered ledge, sharing space with two others. One sharpening a chisel, slowly, the other peeling a root vegetable with the kind of focus reserved for surgery. No one talks not because of silence, but because words feel too heavy. Here soaked before they leave the mouth. The wall itself looks different in the rain, less solid, more honest. The lines of the bricks streaked with water. The mortar darkened the surface slick and glistening, like something breathing. You press your palm to it once out of habit or reverence or need, and it's cold, but not cruel. And you remember a time before this, before the wall, before the rain. But it feels distant, like another life read in someone else's letter. When the horn sounds for supper, it's more of a suggestion than a summons, and those who move toward the cook tent do so with the weariness of those who know. The stew will be thin and the shelter crowded, but the gesture must be made. You sit near the entrance, back hunched bowl, cupped close to your chest, steam rising barely against the rain, and the man beside you nudges your arm and says, "This is nothing. You should have seen the monsoon of the 5th year," and then he slurps and smiles with teeth too white to be trusted. And you smile too, because stories are currency here, and exaggeration is generosity. And for a moment, the rain is just background again. When night comes, it does not arrive so much as merge with the gray that's already there. A quiet transition from wet light to wet dark. And your clothes never dry, your fingers wrinkle, and your thoughts turn sluggish like river mud. You lie back inside the tent, listening to the rain press against the canvas like a persistent memory. And you close your eyes, but do not sleep. Not yet, because the sound is too near and too familiar, and too much like the voices you once knew calling from far off. Not asking you to come, but reminding you you're still here and the rain keeps falling. Not because it must, but because it can. Because some things in this world don't need a reason to stay. They just do. And in the quiet between drops, you begin to understand that the wall isn't the only thing being tested out here. It's you and the rope and the wood and the way your spine bends when no one is watching. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the rain is not an obstacle but a question. And your answer is simply this: you do not leave. The morning begins without color, just the heavy gray of sky brushing against the tired bones of the scaffolding and the smell of old smoke clinging to wet fabric. You stretch your arms slow and sore, your shoulders groaning like beams under load, and when you stand, the ache reminds you that you've been here long enough for the days to blur into each other like ink on damp parchment. Breakfast is a bowl of something beige and bitter eaten, standing as a breeze snakes through the gaps in the wall like a stray thought trying to escape, and someone near the mess line mutters a name, not loud, not solemn, just quiet. Like a word meant only for the ground, and then someone else repeats it and you hear the word dead, without ceremony or weight, just as fact, like weather or rust. You don't ask who, because names here don't carry futures, they carry tools, packs, shifts, and debt. And when you reach the central tent, there's a pack on the table, stiff canvas, laced tight, dark with rain and dirt, and something older. And a man you've never spoken to points at it and says, "His shift is yours today. Take it and make sure nothing goes missing." And then he turns away already chewing, already finished with the moment, and you place your hands on the straps and lift slowly heavier than you expected, not just in weight, but in story. The buckles worn smooth, the leather patches frayed the scent of ash and sweat, and something faintly herbal, like crushed mint left too long in the sun. You sling it over your shoulder, and it fits, like it knows you, like it has already forgiven you for not knowing his name. The path to the southern wall is slick with last night's rain, and your boots grip the mud like they're not ready either. And the sky above is low, full of unsaid things and stillness, the kind that comes before either lightning or confession. When you reach the wall, the foreman doesn't say anything, just points to the broken edge where stone meets sky, and you nod and begin, because that is the language here, motion, nod. Meaning, the pack thuds gently against your back with each step like a heartbeat or a reminder. And as you climb the ladder, you feel the straps bite slightly into your collarbones, as if anchoring you to something beneath the surface. The others barely glance at you, their faces marked with the same dirt and doubt and routine, and you kneel and unpack slowly, carefully. Each tool wrapped in cloth, each nail bound in twine, each stone chisel worn to a curve like a smile, and you realize he was careful. This man who carried this pack before you, not meticulous, not proud, just present in his work. And when you touch the handle of the mallet, you feel the smoothness where his fingers must have rested day after day, and for a moment, you do not move. Just sit there kneeling in the cold wind and let the memory of a stranger pass through your skin like a slow wind. After the rain, you begin your shift, hands working without thought. Your breath steady your spine, bending to the rhythm of stone on stone, and when the pack empties, you fill it again from the pile behind the tent, each load a little lighter. Not because the stones are fewer, but because your body no longer asks why. It only asks how long the sun lifts briefly behind the clouds, casting the faintest gold across the ridge, and someone nearby hums a tune. Without tune, just air and movement and hunger, and you hum too. Not in harmony, not in memory, but in motion. And when the shift ends, the foreman nods at you, Once then turns away, and you carry the pack back to the tent and place it gently on the table, exactly where it had waited this morning. And you stand there a moment, unsure if something is supposed to happen, and when nothing does, you turn and walk away, not toward rest, but toward the fire. And you sit there and let the heat rise against your knees. And the men around you talk about nothing, about goats and soup, and dreams they'll never have. And someone laughs with too much throat and not enough joy. And you stare into the flame and imagine the pack. Tomorrow on someone else's back, or maybe still on the table waiting for hands that don't know they've already been chosen. And you realize that this is what it means to build something like this, to take the weight of someone else's story and carry it forward, not with grief or glory, but with presence. And that somewhere in the mortar between the bricks, his name is there, not carved, not spoken, just pressed into shape by the hands of someone who never got to say goodbye. And you sit there a little longer and let the heat soak into your bones, and the silence settle into your chest, and the pack somewhere behind you waits for morning. You're told the wall is meant to keep them out, but no one tells you exactly who they are. Not anymore, not with certainty. Some say raiders from the north, with faces painted in ash and breath that smells of bone. Others speak of beasts with iron hooves and eyes that do not blink, men made from hunger or vengeance or both. But after enough days and enough bricks, you stop asking what waits beyond and begin to wonder, instead, what the wall keeps in, because every stone you lift, every layer you lay becomes less a barrier and more a memory pressed into shape. The wall grows day by day, stretching across the hills like a scar too old to heal. And when you walk beside it, you feel not protected, but seen. Like something ancient is watching through the cracks, not with judgment but with patience. The kind of gaze that doesn't blink or turn away, just waits. One night, you ask an older worker with hands like rope and a voice like split wood what he thinks lives beyond, and he chews his pipe and says, "Not what?" You think boy, not monsters, not armies, just more dirt, more wind, more places where no one remembers your name. And then he laughs soft and slow and coughs twice into the fire, as if clearing his lungs of secrets. The next day you're assigned to patrol the outer edge, not as a guard, but as a presence walking the top stones, looking down into the vastness beyond. And what you see is not threat, but silence. Land stretched too wide to hold meaning, wind dragging dry grass in slow arcs, rocks piled without reason, birds wheeling with no one to sing to and somewhere far off. A shape you cannot name moving slow and wide across the plain, but never closer, and you realize then that fear is not always sharp. Sometimes it's dull heavy, like a blanket that smothers instead of warms. You sit on the edge, feet dangling, watching the clouds pull shadows across the earth, and you wonder what the wall would say. If it could speak, would it whisper warnings, or simply sigh from the weight of what it carries, because it doesn't just hold back the world. It holds in your silence, your sweat, your days pressed flat and stacked high. You remember the scholar once saying that walls are just stories made solid, but no one believed him because bricks don't talk and wine doesn't write. But now you think maybe he was right. Because when you press your hand to the stone and close your eyes, you feel more than cold. You feel echoes the soft thud of a heart that isn't yours, the rhythm of breath slowed by repetition, the sound of a name almost spoken, but swallowed instead by duty or shame or both. Later that evening, you sit with the others around the fire, and someone passes a flask filled with something sharp and kind, and someone else tells a story about a man who climbed over the wall not to escape, but to remember something he'd forgotten and never returned. And no one laughs, they just nod slowly as if the story has weight, not truth. And when you lie down that night, the sky above you seems wider than before, and the wall behind you no longer feels like a line. It feels like a hand steadying your back and holding your shadow. And as your eyes drift closed, you dream of walking the walls, length not with purpose, but with peace. Each step a question answered, not in words, but in stone, in silence, in space. And when you wake the next morning, you find yourself already reaching for your boots, already rising with the others, already ready to build again. Not because of what waits beyond, but because of what stands behind. You hear them before you see them. Voices rising softly from somewhere just beyond the next bend. Not words, not melodies, just sounds round and low and warm, like smoke curling from a hearth. In winter, not urgent, not bright, just steady. You slow your step, tilt your head, and the sound deepens. Not louder, only closer, like a memory returning without warning. And when you round the bend, you see them. 3 figures crouched along the inner curve of the wall, their hands moving across the stone in small circular motions, fingers dark with dust, arms streaked with effort. One of them, a woman with hair wrapped in cloth, the color of morning fog. Another, older, his back bent like a bowstring. His eyes closed as he hums, each one lost, not in labor, but in rhythm. You stop a few paces back, not wanting to intrude and yet unable to walk away. Their voices don't carry far, they don't need to. The wall hears them. You can feel it in the air, the way the stone seems to lean in, just slightly. The way the dust dances, not from wind but from resonance. You watch as they dip their fingers into a clay bowl, draw symbols. You can't read across the bricks and then wipe them away again. Not erasing but blessing, as if the act of touch itself is the message. You step forward softly and one of them looks up, her eyes lined with sleep or knowledge or both. And she nods just once, not welcoming, not warning, just acknowledging. And you kneel beside them, resting your hands on the cool surface of the wall, feeling its texture, its pulse. And she leans toward you and whispers, "This wall is alive, not with magic, not with gods, but with memory. Each stone remembers the hand that placed it, the hand that bled for it, the hand that broke against it. We sing so. It doesn't forget, so it doesn't lose itself to silence and time." And then she returns to her song, not with drama, just devotion. The man beside her hums deeper now, his breath vibrating against the mortar, and suddenly you hear it. Not just their voices, but something beneath them within the wall, itself a low responding tone, like the earth sighing, like the stone, exhaling. Not a voice exactly, but an answer, and your skin pricks as if touched by unseen fingers, and you realize this is not ceremony, this is care. This is how the wall stays strong, not just from structure, but from sound, from softness, from the human rhythm placed between every cold seam. You stay there longer than you mean to your knees, numb, your hands still resting, flat, your breath falling into sync with theirs, not quite singing, not quite still. And when you finally rise and nod, your thanks they do not speak, just keep singing, and the wall listens. And so do you. For hours after you've left, you hear them faintly each time. Your boots touch stone, you swear it echoes differently, as if tuned, as if gentled. And that night when the wind whistles through the beams, you hum back low and broken but true, and the fire crackles in quiet agreement. And for the first time since your arrival, you feel not alone, not entirely. And when someone beside you murmurs about spirits and builders and old songs, you only smile and say maybe, and rest your hand on the wall as you drift not into thought, but into breath, into presence, into the long, soft memory of stone. It begins with stillness, the kind that settles before a storm. Not silence exactly, but a pause in the breathing of the world, the air heavy, the birds gone, the clouds layered like bruises across the sky. You stand beside the western wall, eyes narrowed against the strange light that bends everything into a dull silver. Your hands are wrapped around a wooden handle, the splinters pressing familiar patterns into your palms. And someone nearby mutters something about the gods being angry. But you know better, the sky doesn't rage. It releases, and when it doesn't ask. It arrives all at once, not in drops or whispers, but in a roar. The clouds split, the wind punches downward, and rain slams into stone, like fists, like memory, like weight. You duck beneath the scaffold, but water rushes sideways anyway, drenching the planks, soaking your back, filling your ears with sound, and you look around and see the others scrambling, not in panic, but precision. Canvas pulled tight tools, gathered buckets, flipped fires. Smothered in mud, the foreman's voice cuts through the noise, sharp and calm, but even he knows this is not a passing cloud. This is the kind of storm that tests not just the wall, but the ones who build it, and so you work through it. You climb up the slick rungs, you anchor tarps to beams, your fingers slipping with every knot, every lash. You blink against the water, stinging your eyes, and feel the burn in your thighs as you brace against the pull of the wind, and every heartbeat feels like thunder. Not above, but inside. After an hour, your clothes are second skin, soaked heavy. Your boots squelch with each step, and your breath fogs warm against the cold rain. But you keep moving, because stopping means collapse. Not of stone, but of spirit. A man near you shouts over the noise, pointing toward the upper edge where a rope has snapped and wood has begun to bow. And without thinking, you run. You don't question your footing, or the gap between the planks, or the ache in your knees. You just run, and when you reach the edge, you throw your body against the support beam, pressing it back into place as others scramble to tie it again. Your shoulder screams, your ribs groan, but the wood holds, and when the rope cinches tight and the weight evens out, you exhale for the first time in minutes, and it feels like blood returning to a limb. Someone slaps your back with a soaked glove and grins, teeth white in the gray, and you both laugh, not from joy, but from release. The worst has passed, and you are still upright, still breathing. The storm doesn't end quickly. It fades slowly, reluctantly, its strength leaking away in softer waves, and by dusk, the rain is only drizzle, and the wind only breath, and the sky begins to open in streaks of pale gold behind retreating clouds. And as you look around at the soaked camp, the sagging tents, the steam rising from damp fires, you feel not defeat, but strange pride. Not for what you endured, but how you endured it. And when you sit near the fire that night, wrapped in a wool cloak that smells of smoke and sheep, you let the heat soak into your skin and close your eyes to the sound of dripping eaves and shifting logs, and someone begins to hum low and aimless, and you hum too. Without melody or purpose, just sound and presence, and you realize the wall is not just stone. It is effort. It is storm. It is the weight of wet fabric and the strength of bent backs and the sound of laughter when there should be none. And as the sky clears and stars blink awake, you feel them above you. Not watching, not judging, just existing. And you sleep that night without dreams, because some days are not meant to be remembered. They are meant to be survived, and you did. It takes longer than anyone expected, not because the wall is stubborn, but because time stretches in places like this, where days blend and feet move and hands repeat until you stop counting how many steps it's taken to get here. The morning it happens, there's no trumpet, no declaration, just a man walking back from the eastern ridge with dust on his cheeks and silence in his mouth. And when someone asks what he saw, he shrugs, points behind him, and says, "It just stops." And at first no one moves, as if the idea itself is a trick, or worse, a test. And then the foreman nods, slow and measured, and says, "All right," and the news moves through camp. Not with cheers, but with confusion, because for so long there has only been the next stone, the next lash of rope, the next shift of weight, and now there is air. Nothing ahead, but air. And when your turn comes, to walk the length, you take it slow, boots brushing loose gravel, the wall on your right, the earth falling away to your left, the wind fresher than you remember. And when you reach the edge, the final stone is smaller than you expected, just a modest block set neatly against the dirt. No marker, no flag, just one last shape in a line of uncounted others. And you place your hand on it, and it feels the same as the first, cool and firm and indifferent. And for a long moment, you do nothing. Only stand and look beyond, and what you see is not threat or promise, only space, a wide plain, stretching into a pale horizon, with no figures, no cities, no answers, only wind moving like thought and clouds drifting like the backs of forgotten beasts. And you sit there on the edge, legs dangling your fingers, brushing the top of the wall, and try to imagine not building, not hauling, not lifting, but simply being. And it feels almost wrong too, light too, still, like waking after a long illness when your body doesn't yet believe it's free. You run your palm along the stone edge and think of the voices who've passed here before yours, the ones who carved the first brick, the ones who died. Mid-shift, the ones who sang to mortar and to silence, and you feel their rhythm still embedded in the wall. Not like ghosts, not like memory, but like warmth trapped in stone. And when you walk back to camp, you move differently. Not faster, not slower, just aware of the ground, the weight of your steps, the sound of your breath in your chest that night. No one says much. The fire burns low, and the food is simple, and someone asks, "So what now?" and no one answers. Not because they don't know, but because the question is too large to hold. In a single night, you sit beside a man who's been here longer than most. His hands scarred, his eyes dark with things he never names. And he says quietly, not looking at you, "Maybe we build something else. Maybe we rest. Maybe we just wait and see." And he chews a bit of dried root and leans back and says, "Strange, isn't it? How we build to keep things out and end up trapping ourselves inside." And then he chuckles low, like gravel in a dry pan, and says, "Still beats fighting over. Goats, and you laugh too, because it's true and because it's night and the wall is finished and everything feels like a maybe. And when you lie down beneath your worn blanket, your boots still damp and your knees stiff, You stare up at the stars, and for once they don't seem far, just quiet, just steady, and you let your mind drift, not toward what comes next, but what you've carried here, the names, the weight, the silence, and you wonder if the wall remembers you, not as a number, not as a task, but as hands that held, and feet that climbed, and eyes that looked out and stayed, and you close your eyes, not because you're tired, but because you're ready, because you know that even when the building stops, the story continues, and the wall is not the end, only the edge of what's next. The wall is quiet now, not gone, not forgotten, just quiet, and so are you. The noise of hammer and rope, the shuffle of boots, the bark of orders. All of it has faded, not abruptly, but like a tide pulling gently back, leaving the stones bare and still. And the silence that fills the space isn't empty. It's full of breath, full of dust, full of the long echo of time, passing through bodies like wind through grass. You rise before dawn, not because you must, but because you can. The air is cold enough to bite, but you welcome it. Wrap your cloak tighter and walk slow toward the edge again. No tools, no burden, only presence. And when you reach the end, where the last stone still rests, untouched by moss, you place your hand on it and feel nothing at first. Then everything not in a rush, but in a slow unfolding like paper dipped in water. The weight of every shift you labored, the voice of every man who worked beside you, the rhythm of every breath shared in quiet camps, it's all there, not loud, not sharp, but there you sit and let it settle around you. Not like a coat, but like a memory that belongs to the skin. And in the pale light, the wall seems softer. No longer a line, no longer a wound, just a spine across the land holding nothing in or out, only being. You think of all that was kept within it, fear, pride, ambition, sweat. And somewhere beneath that tenderness, the kind you don't name, the kind that lives between the cracks like weeds or prayer, and you wonder what story the wall will tell when you're gone. Not of emperors or borders, but of the ones who hummed as they worked, who whispered into stone, who sang. Not because they were heard, but because it made the stones sit easier. You rise again and walk its length, not the full stretch, just a few hundred paces enough to feel the repetition return to your muscles, your joints remembering the rhythm without thought. And as you pass each section, you see it differently now. Not as labor, but as offering, as presence carved one day at a time. And when you return to camp, the others are stirring some packing, some sharpening, some staring into coals as if reading messages only they can see. No one rushes, no one commands. The stillness is shared like bread or heat, and you sit among them, quietly drink something warm, taste of ash and barley, and rest your eyes on the space between tents and trees and sky, and feel it widening inside you like a door you didn't know was there, opening slowly, letting in not light, but possibility. The sun climbs, eventually brushing gold onto the edge of the wall, and someone says it aloud. The word finished, not triumphant, not mournful, just true. And you exhale long and low, not in relief, but in recognition. And when the group begins to break apart, some heading west, some east, some just waiting, you remain for a while longer, sitting on a flat stone, warmed by firelight, not speaking, not thinking, only being. And when it's time you rise, gather your few belongings, a worn satchel, a tool you've kept not for use, but for memory. And you walk toward the path that winds down the hill behind the camp, your boots pressing soft into the dirt, each step its own soft goodbye, and the wall doesn't follow. It doesn't need to. It's already part of you, in your back, in your breath. In the slow way, your heart now beats like stones settling after a storm, and as you disappear into the trees, the wind picks up slightly, stirring dust and leaves, and the wall remains as always, quiet, waiting, listening, holding, and the silence it leaves behind is not absence, it is gift. So now it's done. The footsteps have faded, the dust has settled on every stone, and the wall it no longer asks anything of you. No more lifting, no more waiting, no more watching the horizon for shapes that never came. Just breath, just stillness, just the sound of a fire whispering in the dark, the kind of sound that doesn't speak, but understands. If this story has kept you company tonight, perhaps leave a quiet trace behind a comment, a word, a city where you're listening from, even if no one replies, even if no one sees we're here with you in this long, gentle silence of history. And now, no more words. Just listen to the fire. Let it carry you.